talk and chat, coffee. So we will start our next panel to our speakers. So we'll...
Good morning, everybody. Hello. Yesterday was very inspiring. We had some really good thoughts. Today we're going to be focusing on trying to come out with a better understanding how countries might move forward, how they can strengthen marriage in different ways, some kind of resolution, kind of thinking, what does it mean that marriage is so important in society? So we're heading in that kind of direction. Hopefully we'll get a lot more questions from you or input from the floor. We want a more open discussion. But we're going to start with three wonderful presentations, and we start off today with Harry Benson, who you know from yesterday, and I think he's going to be talking about what governments might be doing to better support the marital family. And I'd like you to just welcome him with some applause.
Good morning, everybody. Was there anyone here today who wasn't here yesterday? No. All second-timers coming back for a second dose of punishment. Excellent. Good. Well, what I'm going to do this morning is to talk... yesterday I talked about how government might or might not have encouraged family breakdown and actually been one of the drivers of family breakdown. And I argued that I don't think government is the driver of family breakdown. I don't think they've made it worse. Today I'm going to ask the question, do I think government can make things better? What policies might strengthen families? And I think that there are some things that government could do. And just because government hasn't done anything to stop family breakdown in the past doesn't mean that they can't do something really good about it. And I started yesterday. I'm going to go over a couple of things just to remind you of where I'm coming from. Over the years in Britain, in the last 40, 50 years, family breakdown has risen pretty much relentlessly from 500,000 lone parent families in 1970 to 2 million lone parent families today. And year in, year out, regardless of which party has been in power, regardless of the nature of the economy, regardless of social changes, family breakdown has risen pretty much in a straight line from 1970 to today. So that, to me, tells me that for me, is the biggest piece of evidence that government policies have not made much difference to family breakdown. There's been a continuous, relentless falling apart of families. And yesterday I also pointed out how divorce cannot be responsible from about 1980 onwards, when divorce rates peaked and have since been coming down. In the last 20 years, divorces in the UK are down by 20%. And yet family breakdown continues to rise. So the driver of family breakdown has been this trend towards births outside of marriage. And this is the long-term trend. This is going way back into 1850s. 1850, only about 5% of babies were born outside of marriage. In 1900, it was the same. You can see the little blips of the Second World Wars where men and women did funny things because all sorts of stuff was going on. And then it's really this massive social change has happened really since the 1970s, and it's pretty crystal clear. This is a really striking chart of births outside of marriage and the sudden experiment that we've had with cohabitation and family breakdown, which has led to family breakdown. Because we know that cohabiting couples are more likely to split up. I pointed out that as of today in the UK, 1 in 5 couples with children are cohabiting, and yet they account for half of all family breakdown, because cohabiting couples are about 4 to 5 times more likely to split up if they have children overall. And I think that's very striking. Yesterday I showed the model which comes from Professor Scott Stanley and his colleagues at the University of Denver. And by the way, I was talking this morning to some people. There are a couple of blogs that you should look up if you're interested in the field of family research. One is Scott Stanley's blog. I'll let you search for it yourselves. It's called Deciding versus Sliding. And it's absolutely fabulous to read if you want to understand the theory of how relationships work and commitment. And the other blog that's worth reading is by the Institute for Family Studies, who bring research to life. And they write fabulous articles which are based on the journal articles, on the academic research, but it's written in a very accessible way. The Institute for Family Studies blog is outstanding. And also, I write a blog for the Marriage Foundation, which you can read if you're interested as well. But this model of relationships, I think, is very helpful for understanding how relationships work, how commitment works. You have you and me, the two arrows in the middle. You and me get together, we're attracted to one another, and we decide that we want to be a couple. And we form a couple, which is the green blob around the outside. And the more we see ourselves as a couple with a future, then the more dedicated we are, the more committed we are to one another. And that's what we think about when we think about commitment. We think about dedication. And the ultimate act of dedication is when we get married. We say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to see us as a couple with a permanent future. So if you like, marriage is the ultimate act of dedication that says, I'm dedicated to us and our future for life. And so marriage is all about dedication. There's a legal aspect to marriage as well, and a social aspect which acts as a constraint on the outside that makes it harder for people to leave. But essentially marriage is about dedication. Cohabitation is quite different. It is about constraint. What happens when you move in? It's easy to move in, but once you've moved in with somebody, your life becomes much more complicated as a couple. And if it doesn't work out, if the dedication goes, and you're not making a relationship work, in the early stages anyway, when people are dating in the traditional sense, if you live together, it makes it much, much harder to break up, to leave, and say, this relationship is not what I'd hoped for. And the inertia of living together and making it difficult to find an alternative means that you continue on into marriage, and so you then end up having a low quality marriage and high divorce rates in the early years, or into childbirth, and you have a high breakup rate in those early years, and I'm going to talk about that in a little. So do you see this basic model is really helpful? Dedication is what marriage is all about. Constraints is what cohabitation is all about. They're fundamentally different aspects of commitment. You move in with somebody, you have commitment thrust upon you, whether you like it or not. And so the trick to relationships is to do dedication first. That's the secret. So if government were to make a difference, how might they help us to make relationships work better? And let me talk about constraints first. Should they help us to commit more through constraints? No, obviously not. They shouldn't make divorce law harder so that it is much, much harder to escape from a horrible relationship. No, that just sounds awful. You're then trapping people in abusive relationships. No, it's just no. I can't think of a good reason why you would want to increase constraints. But you would want to see government help strengthen dedication. You want couples to be more likely to commit to one another. So that's the question I want to address here. What can government do to help strengthen dedication? The sense that couples, or that two people form a couple with a sense of future together, and ideally a future where there is a lifetime commitment. And I think there are three principles that government should use, and this applies anywhere in the world. And the three principles of this, the first is to recognise that it is the early years where family breakdown takes place. Overwhelmingly, family breakdown is concentrated in the early years, and I'm going to show that in a second. And it's true for both marriages and for cohabitation, especially for cohabitation. The second point is to look at scale, just to get the scale right. If we've got a massive problem with family breakdown, we need to have a massive policy, or we need to have something that is significant and not just piecemeal in order to deal with the problem. And I think in the West, though, where we've tried, even in America, where we've heard about $150 million a year going into programs, you know, when you compare it to the scale of the problem, it's still piecemeal, it's still tiny. It sounds big, but it isn't. And then the third principle is to recognise that, that if you want couples, if you want people to stay together so that you've got two parents looking after a child with better outcomes as a result, more resources, more time, more money, and also more capacity to look after the older generation, when things go wrong, when, you know, people like my mum has a stroke and my brother and I can help because we've got wives and therefore we can cancel things and we have a little bit of capacity. And my darling sister, who's a lone parent, can't handle it because she's got no capacity. We want couples, and we see that as important for society, for children, and for the older generation, for doing something outwards. Then we really need to back marriage. So those are my three principles. Let me look at them in a little more detail to wrap up my talk. This is a chart based on the latest big national survey in the UK, and it's called Understanding Society. It's a survey of 40,000 households. That's now currently it's just had its third year's worth of data. And it's a fabulous study. It's an enormous survey. This is what happens when you look at children of all the different ages experiencing family breakdown. And you see that, I've smoothed it out because it sort of goes a bit jaggedy. But essentially, what happens is that you have family breakdown hugely concentrated in years 1, 2, 3. And then after that, it then tails off over the years. So you see how family breakdown is hugely concentrated in the early years. Now this chart is illustrative, I want to emphasise that. This is not exactly what happens, but it's pretty close to what this survey, Understanding Society, is showing us. And it's certainly accurate in the first couple of years, that's the exact data. Thereafter I've just smoothed it a bit. Okay, so you can see the concentration of family breakdown in the early years. Now let's go and have a look at the first 3 years for children under 3. In the UK, about over the last 30 years or so, something like 6 to 8% of children are born to parents where there's only the mother's name on the birth registration document. So they're called sole registered parents. And then you have dual registered parents who are unmarried couples who either live in the same address or different address, and then there's married couples who live together and are legally married. So the sole registered mothers have by definition already experienced family breakdown just before the birth. It's already happened. So that's the first bit. So that's the pink area in the diagram. Starting from birth and working to the right, you can see that's your 6% of babies who have already experienced family breakdown at birth. Thereafter, you can see the couples who split up in the first 3 years. And you can see very quickly, by the time you get to the child's 3rd birthday, that nearly 25% of all children have experienced family breakdown, which is pretty shocking, isn't it? I think we find nearly a quarter of all children have experienced some version of family breakdown by their 3rd birthday. I think that's really shocking. Now that's about half of all who are going to, because in the end, it goes up to 45% at the end. But by end of year 3, with the 3rd birthday, we're already at about 25%. Now in that bit, the couples who split up, the red area there, I hope I haven't lost you so far, the red area there, here's what the risk of breakup looks like from a different national survey, another really big survey, which looks at breakup rates over the first 7 years. And you can see how married couples split up at a fairly consistent rate. So by the time we get to year 7, we're running at about 12% of married couples will split up with children by a child's 7th birthday. But look at the unmarried couples, you're up into 35% plus. I mean, that's pretty shocking. So if you do the sums on this, it works out that in these early years, of parenthood, about 3/4 of all family breakdowns coming from unmarried couples. About 3/4 is coming from unmarried couples. The problem is not divorce. It's just not divorce anymore, and hasn't been since 1980. The problem is the collapse of unmarried families. So that's the thing we have to do something about. Now, just to show that the early years also affect married couples as well, this is the current latest divorce rate trend in the UK, based on the latest data for each year of marriage life duration. And you can see that, again, as I showed you yesterday, with all the different years 3, 4, 5, 6 is where divorce is most concentrated, and thereafter it then decays over time, and you can see that. So it's the early years of marriage, it's the early years particularly of unmarried relationships, where family breakdown is concentrated. So that's your first principle. Have you got that? You have to address if you want to deal with family breakdown, number one principle is it has to happen in the early years. There's no point trying to focus all your attention on the later years, because that's just not where it happens. It happens in the first 3 years. That's crystal clear. Everybody got that. That's really important. First few years. Now here's the second principle, scale. The scale of the problem. If you've got a massive problem, in the UK, we spend £46 billion every year on family breakdown. That's on supporting lone parents with income support and benefits and tax credits and all this stuff. It's on supporting couples who have really acrimonious disputes, and there's domestic violence, and the police are involved, and there's crime involved, and all that sort of stuff. There's educational problems because children are running truant. All these effects of family breakdown add up. The biggest expense is the money that we spend supporting, quite rightly I think, supporting lone parents in the benefit and tax credit system. And we spend 46 billion quid. That's equivalent, that's 55 billion euros. Let's put that in context. That is more than the UK defence budget, and it is half of the UK education budget. It's a massive problem, massive. So what does government do? The government says, we're supporting relationships. Look how good we are. We're spending £7.5 million. £7.5 million sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It sounds like a lot. This is the scale. £46 billion against 7.5 million. 7.5 million is so small, it doesn't even register on my chart. It's not even in the same scale. If we put the Americans' 150 million thing into it, you'd probably still be down here somewhere. The scale is tiny. We've got to get the scale right. If we've got a massive problem, we have to have a serious solution based on scale. Here's the other thing. Government currently spends gives over £7,000 more, so that's 9,000 euros more, to people who live separately than together. And that's part of the thing about supporting lone parents, which is quite right. But we have a perversion of our tax credit system that it pays to live apart. If you're going to earn £7,000 more after tax, then surely we're currently proposing a £200 married tax break. It's just nothing. It's just not even addressing the scale of the problem. Do you see what I mean? Scale is really important. One more thing on scale. I'm nearly there. One more thing on scale. Actually, this is the point about marriage. If you want to support couples, if you want couples in your society, look at this. This is the reality of parents who are still together living with their 15-year-old child. So they've survived the difficulties of bringing up kids. And survive is the right word. I've got 6 kids. And Her Highness outranks me with his 7. But, you know, it's a survival issue sometimes, trying to cope with children. Staying together is hard. And 93% of those who manage it are married. If we want couples, don't focus on the 7% who make it, the long-term stable relationships, who are the rarity. They are the people who smoke 60 cigarettes a day and live until they're 90. They are the exception. They're not the norm. We have to address the problem. So that you've got to focus on the early years, you've got to address the scale of the problem, and you've got to you've got to focus on marriage. And so my final slide is to show the sorts of things that you should be thinking about if you want to address family breakdown. If government can make a difference, it's going to do it through addressing dedication. And it's going to do it through either sending signals, the messages, that this is what we'd like you to do, this is important, or by spending money and bribing you to do it, which they do currently, where they spend money encouraging you to live apart. The signals, be positive and confident about marriage, because marriage isn't perfect, but it's a whole lot better than cohabitation, where very few succeed. We need a minister for family. It's obvious, isn't it? If you're spending more than the defence budget, and we have zero policy, doesn't it make sense to have something really big and get the scale right? And we should distinguish marriage on government forms. You know, silly little things like that which cost nothing. And at the moment it says, on most government forms, it says, are you married or living together as if you are married? Well, it's not as if married, because the outcomes are so different. So silly things like that. We shouldn't be incentivising couples to live apart, we should be incentivising couples to live together and to commit to one another, and we should be supporting relationships in the early years. So with that, I think I'm done.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you very much, Harry. It's so important that you know that we need to reach young people and change the very fundamental dedication to each other. And a wonderful segue is introducing Dr. Josie Hauer, who is a specialist in the Department of Health and Social Services, has a wonderful foundation of marriage education. And since we're keeping track, she's got 3 children. Dr. Hauer,
Hi. So I would concur with everything Harry said, so I won't repeat it. So in my work with the Administration for Children and Families, I won't repeat a lot of what I did yesterday. I get this opportunity to share some things that I have observed in my work as a federal worker, but these are definitely my other opinions, to say. So these are not representative of my agency. However, when the Healthy Marriage Initiative came up, I explained yesterday, it sort of came out of the responsible fatherhood work, which started under President Clinton. And I've come to truly believe that these 2 initiatives are critically linked. Because at least in America, responsible fatherhood, poverty is so linked to single parenting, which is largely single motherhood. Children living in households where the dad is not the resident. Okay, so that is just like a semi-permanent underclass. And it intersects with, of course, education. So if you are a single parent, usually a mom, right, and you're highly educated, you're much less likely to be in poverty, right, than if you have a high school degree and you had a child before you were age 20 or age 25. So those 2 sections, those 2 factors will sort of keep you in poverty a lot. So the Responsible Fatherhood movement, which, again, we have lots of great resources. We have the Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. I think these 2 initiatives will work together, and they go hand in hand. So on one level, I think governments can massively educate men on the important role of fathers in the lives of children. Dads have to be motivated to stick it out when those early years are happening and mom is focused on the kid and they may not be so happy because of many reasons. And so men in general need to be educated writ large on the important role they have in the brain development of their children, in the emotional development of their children, and the spiritual, and all that side. So I'll give you another resource, because the Obama administration is investing a lot of money in early childhood and early development education and research. You have to Google it. We've got an early care and education initiative. But if you go to the Harvard Center for the Study of the Developing Child, or something like that, just put Harvard and early childhood education, you'll find massive amounts of neuroscience, which can be helpful to you to make the argument to people in general about why attachment to 2 caregivers and the differences also between mothering and parenting, brain development of young children. I think this is an incredibly potent area to point out and highlight. Because the more we know about the early development of children, the more we become aware, like, oh my God, family is so important. Now, on the one hand, that translates into early Head Start programs and more early childhood education. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, it should also be concurrent conversation of how important parents are to the early life of a child, the investment of both parents. And I think if men understood that more, or children, young people in general understood that more, then that would be one more piece of information very important to them. Government should review its tax policies about families and welfare policies. At least in America, all these different social services developed, we call it in silos. So each of them developed, under a different administration, and they were serving a different purpose at the time. And so much of them, you could say their original function is out of date or has gotten off track. Do you know what I mean? Like even the welfare started to help widows when their husbands were killed in World War II. Well, that's not the population we're serving. We're serving moms who had children out of wedlock, or without dad around. Completely different population. But yet, the agency, the thrust of the agency was created earlier. So I think, but moving an elephant and changing a federal agency is so difficult. However, we have tried, especially in this marriage and fatherhood initiative, to do more conferences together and projects together. For example, even with the IRS, we're promoting the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a tax credit for working families. And so I would work alongside an IRS program specialist to go out into the community and sort of make the connection between asset building and family structure, right? A gentle way, not beating them over the head with marriage, but just kind of bring it in to where we can bring it in. We had many conferences with the domestic violence advocates and fatherhood advocates and the healthy marriage people to talk about where are the intersections of our fields, to sort of bring those working papers and knowledge base forward, because many times, at least in America, because our nonprofits, our social services are administered in many different ways, not just by the state, but by nonprofits, or by nonprofits who are contracted through the state, which is funded by a block grant for the government. So we have a very complex system. So we have to outreach and educate and make partnerships and communicate to all these various levels of service providers. Does that make sense? Or maybe it doesn't make sense to Europeans. Like, you think we're crazy Americans, but you sort of understand that? So part of the role of our work and my work is to gather people together in coalitions and to educate them about how to maybe work together. A concrete example of that is, as we're moving along in the Healthy Marriage Initiative and the projects, everybody said, yeah, couples fight over sex, money, and in-laws. Oh, and child rearing is in there too. So with the Office of Community Services and all of their great financial literacy experts, we have wonderful, again, resources on the FDIC website about money smarts, curricula to educate young people and anybody about banking and credit and how to manage budgets and stuff like this. So we said, yeah, those are like the skills you need for financial asset building over a lifetime. But there are certainly relationship issues associated with those, right? Why is the credit card bill going up? And how to talk about budgets. And so we combined, our agency funded the development with, I think with the FDIC, I'm not quite sure, the development of a massive curricula book on combining relationship skills and communication skills, all centering around asset building and budgeting. So we combined both sort of how to talk about money and how does your experience in your family, in your early family, feed into your problems about money management in your family. And that is a really creative, interesting project. Also, it's free curriculum. If you're interested, email me. I will email it to you in a PDF file. So those are very concrete educational products that an agency can do. On the larger picture, I sort of like to beat this drum, so I'm just going to take advantage of this. I think government can recruit men to be teachers in their elementary school And we can incentivize men to become much more involved in the education system. I don't know about your systems, but in our country, the human service systems and the education system is largely women. And the area of the government, which has been most involved in family strengthening for years prior to this, our agency, has been the military. So military families, there's been actually Scott's family and others have been involved with supporting military families for years with marriage education services, with family strengthening, and we have another sort of independent network called Extension Services, which is very rural and countryside, and it has a whole history in of itself, but it's not a federal initiative. It has been doing family strengthening work, and there's tons of free resources. But what they do in the military, they can do in other parts of government. And certainly, we could recruit more men to be managing and helping in elementary school or even Head Starts, these types of things. Now, what the fatherhood work has done is, especially in agencies such as Head Start. Head Start is the federally funded early childhood, and we've got Head Start programs from birth to 3, from 3 to 4, okay? You know, when these programs started, again, it's mainly run by women and outreach to women, and the dads are not around, so why should we reach out to them? We began to strongly push them and incentivize them in some small way of why it's important to reach out to the men, to get them to be on the Head Start policy councils, to get the dads into the classrooms to do volunteer work. And you keep pushing. First you get resistance, you get pushback, right? But then you incentivize and you know, always include speakers at conferences and these type of things, and it's pushed it forward. So our child welfare policy also, we started pushing, okay, you know, this child has to be removed from this home, but look to the grandparents. We have actually grandparent fostering. There's a huge movement within our child welfare system, how to support grandparents being the foster parents instead of just taking the child and putting them in a quote, stranger's home, you know, that type of thing. So we're realizing, aha, we have to really reach out to the levels of family networks to support children. Through this is not so much government, but through work-life balance policies, I think corporations can be encouraged to have more work-life balance and to include family strengthening services in their range of employees assistance programs. Do you have that in your, like if you work for a corporation and you want to stop smoking, and the corporation has a program where you can go and learn to stop smoking? Do you have that in your? Okay, so in our corporations and in government we have that. So you can get some addiction services or stop smoking or healthy eating or something like that. You could include some family strengthening work there. I also think that some of the media campaigns that the Responsible Fatherhood work has done have been brilliant. You can find those on the Responsible Fatherhood website. They're funny, they're cute. The media campaigns are very good. We have a campaign now called Barbershop Conversations. So where do men go besides the bar? The Pope in England, to talk about their relationship problems. The barbershop, right. So they have this barbershop campaign, or they're called Barbershop Conversations. And they, you know, even educated, anyway, there's contractors. We contracted with wonderful technical assistance and consulting agencies to go and design these campaigns. So we can do very creative things like that. What else can we do? The asset building. Oh, just make linkages within government, which we are trying to do, but that's like moving, you know, it's moving slowly, although we should do more of that. At least in America, again, we have so many tiers. We have the federal government funding the state and block grants, and then we have the federal government doing demonstration grants, doing direct funding to smaller or larger independent agencies or nonprofits. So we have to work in many different levels and many different ways, encouraging that. Okay. I have 3 minutes. Okay, well, one of the biggest, at least in America, is the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Right? That's changing the landscape of American health care. As we make more linkages between stress caused by marriage, stressful life events, stressful marriage, stressful conflicts, and how that impacts on health, I think we will see more attention paid. So any linkages that you can make between the health of a person, or individuals, or families, or children, and low conflict relationships, that would be, I think, a very important thing to do, to move a pro-marriage agenda indirectly forward. You don't always have to do the moral argument, but do the practical arguments where you can. Neuroscience, I mentioned that. I also think governments, especially state governments, could do way more on offering divorce prevention programs. Not necessarily requiring them. I'm sure we get lots of pushback for requiring, but you can incentivize them. Just like you can incentivize. We do have some programs, like in the state of Connecticut, if you want a divorce and you have children, you are required to go through a 3 to 4 hour communications course, right? But we could do a campaign on the state level, right, to say, okay, if you're even begin thinking about divorce, here are some programming that you could go to think it through. Even don't say, we're neutral about divorce, we're not going to tell you not to divorce, but we're going to give you a program to help you think it through. So a lot of times when people are in constant conflict, they're never relieved of that pressure internally, emotionally. So they can't think clearly. So they get emotional and driven, and then they escalate, and then once you get lawyers involved, it's all about the fight, right? So I think those type of programs, targeted strategic interventions, are extremely important. And to think through what might be the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. If you wanted to promote something in your country, for your agency, or your regional government, or your local, town or city, where would be the, again, it's an American term, the low-hanging fruit? Like, which problem would be the most obvious that you could say, hey, if we targeted this problem, we could save some money and help the people. So, targeting unmarried couples, that's a big, huge intervention that some of our big projects did under the Healthy Marriage Initiative, and these are really usually the most vulnerable, most challenging couples. They're at risk for multiple births. Anyway, they're at risk for many things. So you've got to be prepared to provide a lot of wraparound services, including employment supports. Time's up. I will respect the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Josie. Such a wealth of information.
Welcome.
And welcome.
Sorry, I just found this virtual training just on their website. This Healthy Marriage. There's free training about lots of things. There's so much there. I really hope those who are interested.
Yeah, I'm sure, Heiner, you will create a resource list where we can get blogs, etc. We just need to get all the resources out that you all need. Okay, I have the pleasure to get to know Josef Gundacker over the last day. He is from the Families Forum in Austria, marketing assistant for aid organizations, the president of Family Forum Austria, and the father of 5 boys. Anyway, let's welcome, and I give you the floor to Josef.
Stronger.
Yeah. It's okay. First of all, thank you very much. It's great to be here. 2 years ago, so I've been here too. It's like a homecoming, and first of all, also thank you for the organizers for the Switzerland. Yeah. The topic today: marriage and family policy in the West. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? The question is, where are we first? Family policies in the European Union have been introduced in response to the demographic changes unfolding throughout Europe as birth rates have fallen. Solo parenting has become more commonplace, and older family members are living together. The contemporary family, according to OECD sources, is at the epicenter of that transformation. These changes are creating new problems and needs, especially for parents, the OECD sources say. In general, the European Union views family as a source of economic prosperity and encourages the member states to incorporate family policies into the broader economic and social policies. The family policy goals of the member states focus on three dimensions or aims, and they are: first, child well-being; second, gender equality; and third, balancing work and family life. But gender equality is based on the equal pay principle, Article 141 of the EU Treaty. It is an official policy of the European Union with important implications for families. But you might be surprised to hear now maybe some politically incorrect statements, but you might be surprised to hear that the family policy goals of the member states, in my opinion, are to a large extent counterproductive and a stumbling block for the well-being of the children and the family. Why? First, because under well-being of the child is only meant that the state has to provide for childcare and the parents are responsible for the education and material well-being of the child. The emotional needs of the children are not mentioned. Second, the gender equality policy based on the equal pay principle concerns women's rights, first of all. Thinking, when a woman is financially independent, she will better manage her interests and the family. Third, the idea that individuals who manage their time and resources, which are well educated with enough financial resources, will be prosperous and happy, is a mistaken idea. The aim for balancing work and family life indicates that family is a private matter, and man and woman can find primarily fulfillment through their job by organizing their public and private time. For many people, not only their work and family are out of balance, but their whole life is out of balance. Family is seen, according to the European Family Report, as a human resource for economic growth and well-being. The family is, according to the Family Report, a dynamic form of human coexistence. However, many family forms and lifestyles are neither dynamic, nor supportive, nor responsible. Family researchers name the main problems of families: the lack of material well-being, the lack of education and health. This is, however, in my sight, a very short-sighted perspective. Material well-being, education and medicine can resolve some issues, but it cannot give us emotional stability, nor resolve and cure our relationship problems, unless we address the spiritual and moral vacuums and the issue of selfish individualism, which destroys the family relationships. We will not be able to strengthen the family. Families are supposed to be a support and resource for the children's growth, but too often they are a source of stress, distraction and disappointment. What is the core problems of the contemporary family? Our Western culture aims to nurture man and woman of independence. But by stressing independence and autonomy, we have turned away from family values and celebrate individualism and a self-centered lifestyle. We place more importance on our career because that brings us recognition and appreciation. The family seems to bring us only into trouble. We have created a culture of listening to our parents. Women are pitied when, as a mother, she's only taking care of her child. Our culture doesn't consider parents to be of importance for the well-being of the children. What are the primary needs of the child? Of a teenager, a woman, a man, a mother, or a father? Of course, we need money to feed the child, to send it to school. We need a house to live in, a car to get us to work. We might need a smartphone to connect us to our workplace, our friends and family. But the real need of a child is to experience the trust and love of their parents. A child doesn't care much how much their parents know and what they do. It only cares who they are. This is my mom, this is my dad. And the teenager looks for guidance and hopes that the parents will trust and love them. This is a picture of my boys, and I can talk about from my own experience. A student once complained, all I need is love. All I get is homework. But if parents are emotionally immature, their love for their children are often deficient, subjective and possessive. Such parents often seek to take advantage of the natural love and loyalty of the child for their own emotional satisfaction and destroy so the trusting bond and harm it. A man needs a woman, and a woman needs a man in order to be a complete human being. We need a partner to trust, to rely on, and to love. These are our real needs. A woman who gets divorced doesn't have only a financial problem. She is often devastated, lost, and hopeless. But when husband and wife work together, keep the relationship alive, then they can manage the time and finances much more easily. It doesn't make sense to first manage the external needs and neglect the internal ones. Family is widely understood as a plural form of life, as an individual choice, a private matter. However, marriage and parenthood and family is not a choice, it is a decision. It is a life decision. Marriage is not just a loose relationship, it's a bond. When marriage becomes self-serving, thinking only about our own benefit, my own benefit and gratification, such a marriage is destined to break up. And you can't choose one day to have a child and the next one harm. And when you have one, you can't divorce yourself from it. And you can't separate from your parents, but you can't divorce. You can separate from your parents, but you can't divorce yourself from your parents. Family is an individual decision, but not a private matter, because the outcome of the decision, and we heard a lot about that already, affects the society at large. Family is not only a source of economic prosperity, it is the source of human prosperity, the most important human capital. The defining value of the European Union is freedom. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of brotherhood. But more or less, we ourselves, from the individual level to the family and society level, are those who destroy that freedom, who destroy our dignity and the spirit of brotherhood. And the problem starts within our mind, our way of thinking, and our value system. What's important to us, we have to ask ourselves. In our materialistic society, we are inclined to be self-serving, thinking first about our own interests and career. It seems that our value system is turned upside down. We know what freedom is. People often don't understand, but people don't often understand the purpose of freedom and how freedom works. My freedom ends where the freedom of my brother or sister begins. But by investing into the relationship and building a bridge to my brother or my sister or my wife, the freedom increases. And when I try to establish a relationship, looking first for my own benefit, and the other person discovers my wrong motivation, the freedom diminishes.
2 minutes.
So, in order to help people and bring about positive change to the individual, the family, and society, we have to understand the inner dynamic of life, love, and how relationships work. If you want to build better families and a better and prosperous society, we have to think about the meaning, the purpose and value of marriage, of parenthood and family, and how the family works. If we don't understand the dynamic of love and its uplifting or harmful influence on the life of a person, we won't be able to help. One thing I can say about my own experience, about my own family. My family, that is my wife, my children, sometimes seem to be the problem. But they are also the solution. How does human life and human relationships function? They function by the principle of give and take. Have you ever thought about why only about 100 years ago the Wright brothers managed to fly? Because they understood the principle of aerodynamics and applied it. And why? As human beings, we are not capable of building peaceful relationships because we violate the principle of give and take. Dr. Moon, the founder of the UPF and the Unification Movement, always emphasized that the most precious philosophy is to live for the sake of others. So when a husband and a wife invest to build a relationship of trust, to live for the sake of the other, they create then the environment for the family to grow and develop. So when we value family, when we understand the purpose of marriage and treat parents with dignity, when we learn to look and think differently, we act differently. To conclude, because the family is the nucleus of society, the school where we all can learn the very basics in and for life, we have to think about the standard needed to make family a better place. In the educational system, we constantly discuss educational standards. to make our school a better place. For the family system, we want to do away with them. So, the recommendation, the EU member states need to look at families as subject, as partner, not as an object and dependent. Secondly, the member states and the family policy has to pay attention to the role and responsibility of parents and think how to create a framework for a healthy environment for families. And third, the EU member states have to make family mainstreaming the core policy. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you so much. Harry has to go in a very short time, so he's just asked if anybody has a question specific to him, if they would like to ask it now. Yes, Christian?
Yeah, thank you very much for a very inspiring. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your inspiring contribution. I was wondering the source. You pointed out how much money, how much costs do single parents provide for the state, and then you said how much is spent. And the source, did you mention which source that is? Is that reliable material from the government? Or?
The cost of family breakdown is calculated every year by the Relationship Foundation. So if you Google Relationship Foundation, cost of family breakdown, you will find it. And on that website, you will find a list of all the expenses.
Okay, fine.
That's number one. Number two is the 7.5 million. Comes from it's funded by the Department for Education in the UK. So it's completely reliable. The Prime Minister frequently talks about £30 million spent over 4 years. It sounds better if you say £30 million and then add it by 4 years.
Okay, one more if I may. Yeah. You said the decisive factor is dedication.
Yes.
Dedication to make a relational marriage work.
Yes.
And then you said if we also spend, but are you sure dedication is something that the government can in somehow help to create? I mean, who would in programs or schools? It's not created by making a nice website, right? Even websites are helpful. And if I think about teachers and school, if they are not married, if they are not dedicated, yes, they cannot provide the good example for that. How do we create that without using the religious bodies or the communities, the faith communities? Or is there a way to create that in your model?
Yes, there is. Let's go back to the... Yes. Could you put my slide on with that model of dedication? The ultimate act of dedication, what keeps couples together, is the decision to be a couple with a permanent future, which is when couples marry. And I mentioned from the, the outcomes of parents with 15-year-old children. 93% of those who stay together are married. So if you want couples to stay together, you have to look at marriage seriously, because that's where almost all of the intact couples come from. So where the government can help is by saying, do you know what? Yes, dedication is important, but it's the act of permanent dedication that really distinguishes couples who stay together from those who split up. And what we've had so far over the last 40 years of rising family breakdown is we've had government policies which have said it's okay if you marry and it's okay if you don't marry. No, it's not. It's not okay. It's not okay for your children. it's not okay for the taxpayer who ends up paying the bill. Government must, as a starting point, must say marriage is important, marriage is different, and government should support marriage. Full stop, end of story. And if it doesn't do that, we will have the continuous decline. I've actually got one slide I want to show you. Let's put this one in. I've got one slide I want to show you, which is from my longer presentation. I brought some spare slides just in case.
Okay.
How about that? Let's just go to the end. That's one. Here we go. Right. Have a look at this. This is the trend away from marriage. The red line in this chart is women born in 1954. So today's 60-year-old women. When they were born in 1954, this is the rate at which they got married. And you can see that over 90% of women aged 60 today in the UK, the red line, over 90% have got married at some stage. Some of them are now widowed, a lot of them got divorced, but the point is that a huge proportion, almost all, got married at some point. Look at 40-year-olds, women born in 1974, the middle line, and you see that it's around about 70% are going to get married. The dotted line is where the trend will take us. Look at today's 20-year-olds, born in 1994. Only half of all today's 20-year-olds are going to get married. We are going to see a dramatic reduction in the number of couples staying together. Government has to address this. And if we don't address this, we will have fewer couples, and we will have fewer people to look after our children and fewer people to look after our older generation. So when I talk about dedication, I'm saying government must say, is that me?
No.
No, it's someone else.
It's your heart.
So that's my point anyway, is that government must be much clearer and positive about marriage, because that is the ultimate act of dedication.
Yeah. Can you just make one more point? I'm sorry. Just one more point before we have another question for Harry. If you take that 50 billion a year and you take it back, that it's cost that for the last 25 years, because that's when divorce rates peaked. That's the national debt of Britain today. So that's $1.25 trillion. Okay. So that's, yesterday I showed the national debt. So if the divorce rates had been the same as, say, 1980s or something like that, or before that, you wouldn't have that. And all things being equal, the national debt of Britain would exist today. Thank you. Okay?
Yeah.
So, sorry.
If I understand correctly, particularly the teenage pregnancies in England are rampant. And is that
Going down.
It's going down at the
Yes.
moment? Because the passion is very high, and the government has actually been supporting that. Is that one of the reasons why the statistics are that way?
Thank you. The answer is no. Teenage pregnancies are going down and have been going down since the year 2000. The government would like to claim that the teenage pregnancy strategy that they set up in the late 1990s under the Tony Blair government has been the cause of that. But actually, when they implemented their strategy, teenage pregnancies were already on the way down. I think a much better explanation for why teenage pregnancies are going down and why mental health problems amongst teenagers are going up is the rise of social media. I think kids are spending so much time looking at their boxes that they're no longer relating to actual real people and doing stuff that makes them pregnant. They're not taking, it's true, they're not taking as many drugs. They're not behaving, there's not as much teenage crime, there's not as much teenage pregnancy, there's not as much teenage conception, there's not as much teenage abortion, because they're not talking to each other in the flesh, they're actually just sitting in a box saying lol and joke and other things.
Caroline,
And it's in their heads.
Caroline, he only has 2 minutes, sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Harry if, before you leave, because we want to draw up some conclusions and in particular recommendations to the UN, to government. You just mentioned a few, but is there any other point that you would want to make there?
My recommendations are pretty straightforward, really. I think that governments have to recognise that if you want couples to look after children, and you want couples to who have the capacity to look after the older generation, and to care for the older generation, rather than the state paying for children, or rather than the state paying for the older generation, then we have to be more supportive of marriage. Because in the UK, and this is going to be similar across Europe, 4 out of 6 married couples will stay together while they bring up their children. Only 1 out of 6 unmarried couples will stay together while they're bringing up their children. It's black and white. Some of it is the people who marry and the people who don't. Some of it is to do with education and income, but not nearly enough to explain the relentlessness of the increase in family breakdown. We have to back marriage, and that's what governments need to be doing. If otherwise, we're just going to be spending more and more and more and more on welfare of children, because parents aren't looking after them, and welfare of the older generation, because parents aren't looking after them. Not to mention, fragmented families means more housing. We have housing crises as well. All of these social indicators, they're all tied in to family and the collapse of marriage.
Okay, thank you so much, Harry. I think it's good to go. I think it's good to go.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Lynn and I just thought, before we throw out some more questions, because this is about government policies and how they might strengthen marriage, and we'd like to just ask if anybody in their countries, they know of any initiative which has been taking place, which is they think is helping the marriage, the marital family. I'd just like to ask if anybody, Tim, you've worked in government with social family. Yes, Christian.
It's not that I have good ideas, but I think Mr. Barr might be able to contribute something, because he mentioned that he thinks a lot of the money is spent in the wrong way. That's what I understood he said yesterday.
Yeah.
And I remember that he was invited to Russia, he said in the talk. And so he is very knowledgeable about the Russian policy to support families.
Yeah.
And then he might maybe be able to give us some good ideas.
Do you have some idea?
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you again, Benson, for this brilliant presentation. Yes, Russia does have a demographic problem. We all know that. Yeah, we had a totally breakdown in families around the 90s, when the Soviet Union stopped existing, and they were below 1 child per woman. So what they did then under Putin was that they supported families with money, and they found out that didn't work, just because the real problem of the families in Russia was that they didn't have a place to stay. They needed some accommodation. And they changed the program 2 years ago, and now young families in the area of Moscow, they got a flat by the state, and this seems to work. So it always is a question if you have an intelligent investment by the family, by the government, or you have a not so intelligent investment.
What you're saying is that every country has a different issue which harms the married family to some extent. And for them, it was, they couldn't afford a house, and therefore...
Your microphone.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else feel they have a policy in their country that is positive? Yes.
I think that in Europe, at least, one of the countries that has the most developed system in this area is France. Right now, the French government is cutting down a lot on this, but there is a model which is unique in France, which has been copied also by countries such as Portugal, which is a representation of the family associations. There is a national union of family associations in France, which is an institution funded by the government and which is representing all the different family movements that have been recognized by the government. So it stretches from the movement that I represent, which is the French Catholic Family Associations, and it goes to the rural families, for example, from the countryside. All of these movements have different actions, but all aiming at supporting and strengthening families. And the French law provides the possibility to consult with this union, the National Union of Family Associations, whenever decisions are taken at the political level regarding family policy, and other family-related issues. And I think it's quite unique that there's an expression which is used to describe this institution, and that is the Parliament of Families. So the families themselves, they can be member of the family association, and the family association in its turn is represented first at the local level, then at the regional level, and then at the national level. And the weight of each of these movements is representative. It means that the number of families that are members will be reflected in the number of seats that they will have at the national level, but also the local level. And not only are the families taken into account, but also the size of the family. So large families will have more representation. Each child counts for half a part, and the mother and the father count for a full part. So I think this model is very interesting and not very well known abroad, and can certainly be a source of inspiration for other countries. I come from Sweden, which is a country which is often given as an example for family policy. But what I always underline is that Sweden, in fact, has no family policy. There is no such concept as family policy in Sweden today. There's only one political party that talks about family policy. All the policies are based on an individualistic perspective and not a family perspective. So there's a big difference there as well. I won't go into details, but I think looking at the French model is interesting in terms of how families themselves can influence political decisions.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anybody else who thinks they have some idea?
It's more, it's more of a question. My daughter had 2 babies in Austria, and she got €1,000 a month for 1 year for each child. It was a policy introduced to encourage birth rate. I wanted to know, how is this given to people who are married, unmarried, and what are the results of this, policy where you give, means a lot of money. €1,000 for 1 year, €12,000, so she could raise her children.
Where is that?
In Austria. So what are the results? I mean,
I think that.
I guess I can answer the question. I guess I can answer the question. The thing is, this was a mistake actually. First, you have to make a difference between trends, real trends, and short developments. If you speak about Moscow, if you speak here, absolutely, thank you very much. If you speak about Russia, we can't yet talk about a trend. Yeah, this is a too short development. So demographic developments, they take a long time. It takes a long time also till we can really talk about a trend. Yeah? If you ask about Austria, the Austrian government decided to invest into children. On the other hand, we have in Europe the French system. The French government decided to invest into kindergartens and schools and crèches. That's possibilities to get support by the state, but not dependent on how many children you have. What does that mean? Combined with the idea that you don't pay any income tax in France up from 3 children. Okay? This has the effect that French have more bigger families. Yeah? This is a big difference to all other European systems. That means if you have a nice income, you have 2 things to have in France. You have to have a job and you have to have children. If you have a job and you have children, you don't pay any income tax. We can't oversee the effect anymore, because this is a trend already. And go back to Austria. In Austria, it doesn't play a role if you work or if you don't work up from 2 children. Partner from university, he had a model, and we compared 3 families. 3 families. All 3 families had 2 children. First family had a family income of 1,500 euro. That's pretty low. Then we had a second family where we had 3,000 euro a month income, and the fourth family, they had over 6,000 euro a month. And if we compare that after taxes and after support by the state, the difference was 180 euro a month. That doesn't make sense anymore to have a job if you have children and if you don't own the flat where you live, okay? So this is very, very important. What does make sense? It's an intelligent investment if you invest in families and stable relations.
Thank you so much. And anybody else have a policy in the country where they feel is working straight? Okay. Just on the website. I just want to share just one thing, if possible. I was inspired by what Australia is doing. There's many countries doing things, but Australia has developed. We have, you know, in most Western nations, you have health centres, like community health centres. Yesterday, Peter was sharing that he's a doctor, and people come to him with their relationship problems, and he deals with health issues, and they talk about their divorces or their struggles or their pain, and he can give them antidepressants or something, a listening ear. So Australia understood we are relational beings, and they have now set up relationship centres in almost every community. So people with relationship problems can go there and talk to somebody about their relationship issues and get the support they need. They have a college which trains people for these relationship centres, and social workers work out of there to deal with abuse and all kinds of other issues. So it becomes a central point for your relational needs. You get parenting classes, you get, so it understands we are not just physical beings, intelligent beings which need an education system, but we're relational beings that need relational support throughout our life. And if you provide the right support in the right place, you can maybe help people much better than a physical doctor can with his antidepressants and everything. So I really want to, I thought this was a very good idea, and I can only encourage you to go to this site and learn about it. Relationships.org.au. Okay? So, lastly, Lynn.
Behind
Yes, let's just open to other questions, whatever questions are. There we go.
Questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So recently we had a conference on family in the Czech Parliament. We did this conference together with German UPF, and one of the conclusions was, or one of the panel was also family and media. And we are talking here how the family should be, how the government should support media and so on. But usually the people who are in the media, in the government, they themselves don't represent this family as we talk about. And this is a big issue. So if the journalists are divorced or are single mothers, So it's very difficult to talk about a good family with 5 children, 6 children, and so on. The same in the government, in the policy, we know this kind of people, so this is, I would say, another world in a way, and everybody speaks about his own experience. So the question is how to change this point also, how to become a mainstream in the media. I was also 3 months ago I participated in another conference.
I think there's one question,
and
yeah?
This traditional family is not a mainstream. This is the problem.
Yeah, so Josie, can you answer
Yes,
that?
I can.
Fair, good.
Of course, we face this on many, many levels, this issue. How to promote, marriages, and how can people who are in suffering marriage do the work? Or fatherhood, the whole fatherhood issue. You start doing fatherhood work and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I have many unresolved feelings toward my own dad. And all these personal things come up. And so it's very, very important to introduce that larger picture. Because of course, when you bring this topic up, people's personal history, they're going to have to chew on and digest again in some level, or they're going through a difficult divorce. But even people who are going through a difficult divorce certainly can see the value of marriage to society. And that's why education and also how marriage trends relate to social and economic stability and the well-being of children. They may not be able to be motivated to make personal changes, but I've seen many people. I'll give you an example, a kind of extreme example. Some women who work at domestic violence shelters they work there because they've experienced domestic violence. So their experience with their husband or their lover was terrible, and they have huge resentment toward men. So when we brought them together to work with people who are promoting responsible fatherhood, and yeah, even if he's a rough guy, the kids really care about him. Even if he's landed up in jail, the kids still want to have a relationship with him. You can imagine all the emotions flying in that room.
Sure.
Incredible. But we had to weather this, and just in a nice atmosphere, in a not super academic understanding, there's a lot of emotion in the room. Educate people. And that's very, very important. Very important. So the more you can do that, acknowledging when you're presenting material that, we all have personal feelings about this. But it's important to look at from a bigger picture.
Yeah, that seems to be...
Yeah, I'm sorry we're out of time. Obviously, there's so much more we want to discuss and hear from our panel, but we're really, really grateful for the wealth of information and experience of our panel, and thank you.
Already. My main point is I want to thank you all for coming here, but I want to also extend particular thanks to some of the people that were not mentioned so far that have contributed actually considerably, because this conference was born in Venice when we had a meeting among a few people who were, well, we felt compelled when we saw, for instance, some of the issues that... I want to thank especially 2 people here, Steve and Stacey, who is there, and also our dear friend Josef Gundacker, also Christian Hausmann. Actually, these 3 people were instrumental in setting this whole European project of this conference here at the UN up. I mean, some live in Finland, some live in faraway Austria, and some live in faraway Germany. I mean, not so far away. But anyway, I felt it was an input also, it was a result of networking, of also beyond national barriers. And I'm grateful that you gave your input also in terms of recommendations of various speakers. We have a whole wide variety of speakers that we had representing all kinds of countries and traditions and cultures and so forth. So I'm grateful also for that, for those contributions. Stephen, really, thank you. You did actually a great job.
that nobody maybe seemed to see so much, but we did a lot. And also Joseph, thank you very much. We have to go on with what we started here, but I want to also pay tribute to actually, of